So welcome to this video as we look at the 2024. So I'm going to take you through section A so that you're able to see if you know how you can go about it, or how you would have actually answered the question, or how you need to answer the questions in the exam, especially if you're preparing for the upcoming exams. So question number 1 there says that figure 1 shows a generalized animal cell. So this is an animal cell. Then it says identify the parts labeled A, B, and C in figure 1. So remember, A is representing the cytoplasm, and B is representing the cell membrane. So remember that this is an animal cell. It does not have a cell wall, so that's the reason why. So this is the cell membrane. Then C is representing the nucleus. Then B says, name 2 organelles present only in plant cell. So remember, they want you to state 2 organelles that are present only in plant cells. So an organelle is a membrane-bound structure. So those that are found only in plant cell, 1, we can simply talk about, chloroplast. Then 2, we can talk about the cell. So these are 2 parts that you could have actually talked about that are specifically found in what we are calling as being plant cell. Then C says, explain the function of the part labeled B. Yeah, so what is the function of the labeled B? Yeah, so the part labeled B is the cell membrane, and we know that it is actually selectively permeable. So we can simply say, selects materials, that enter or leave the cell. So it actually selects materials, or if you want, you could have used the word it selects substances, that enter or leave the cell. So that is the function of the part labeled B, which is simply the cell membrane that we have there. Then this says, describe the effect on the cell in figure 1 if it was placed in an hypertonic solution. Now, if you look at an hypertonic solution is a solution whose concentration is higher than what is inside of the cell. So it is actually high. So when it is surrounded by an hypertonic solution, it simply means that water will start moving, out from the cell. So the cell will start losing water. So the water molecules will start moving by osmosis into the hypertonic solution. So it says describe the effect on the cell. So I can simply say that the cell, will start, to lose, water by osmosis. So it will start to lose water by osmosis, leading to cell crenation. Because this is an animal cell, so it will lead to the shrinking of the cell, and that is what we simply call as being cell crenation. So that is cell crenation. So that's the effect that is going to be there. So what the cell will start to lose water by osmosis, leading to cell crenation. So you could have talked about that, and that's basically the simple idea you could have. Let's go to question number 2. It says figure 2 shows the structure of a fungus. So this is what they have given you here. We can right away try to label these parts so that you are able to see, the parts. So this is an example of a rhizopas, and these that look as if they are going down, those are what we call as being the rhizoids. Then F there is representing what we call as being the stolon. Yeah, they are all made up of, what we call as being hypha. That's what we mean. Then the structure that moves upright there, E, is what we call as being the spore. That is the sporangiospore. Let me just sporangiophore. So that is the sporangiophore. And that one there, what you are able to see there, is called the sporangium. So that is called as being the sporangium. then these are microscopic, spores that we have, or like seeds that are going to come out from there. So you need to know how to label these parts, because they are simply going to be asking you in an exam to do so. Now, after identifying that, we can now answer the question as they wanted us to do in this exam. It was simply saying that identify the parts labeled D and G. So what is D? D is simply the sporangium. So that is the sporangium. Then G is representing the rhizoids. So that is representing the rhizome. Then B says, explain the function of the part labeled E and F. So what is the part played by E and F? So that is what the question is asking us there. So what is the function that is actually played by, E and F? So when we talk about E, we can simply say that it holds the sporangium in position. So it holds the sporangium in position, or we can simply say supplies. If you want, you can simply say supplies nutrients. So it actually supplies nutrients to the spores in the sporangium. So you could have actually talked about, or it supplies water and mineral salts. So you could have also said it supplies water and mineral salts, to the sporangium. So basically, you would have actually, talked about that. What about, the part that is actually labeled F? So when we talk about the part that is actually labeled F, which we are simply calling as being the storon, the storon can actually be used in transporting. We can of course talk about maybe transporting, water and mineral salts. So it is actually possible that that is going to be